All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alex Frelichman. I'm VP of Sales at Telrad Networks, and this is our Transition to Part 96 webinar together with Google. Just a quick reminder, all lines are muted. You are welcome to send your questions offline. Since it does say proprietary and confidential, I hope everybody's NDAs are in place. But on a serious note, we're gonna spend our next hour with Google's team. Martin Jensen is with Google SAS Wireless team. Gonna be presenting for the next 30 or so minutes. At the end, we are gonna take over, share a few slides. Just a quick reminder what Telrad has to offer, just quick updates. We're gonna leave Q&A towards the end. That being said, feel free to send questions, obviously during the slides, and we will be looking to them and try to address them as they come, as long as they're relevant. On that note, Martin, take it from here.
Thank you very much, Alex, and it's an honor to present in this meeting. What we wanted to do here is present some of the learnings, some of the questions that we typically get in to the audience, and hopefully address some of the questions that may have and give you some practical examples on some of these transition that needs to happen here pretty soon. So without further ado, I'm going to flip on to slide number 2. You've probably seen this before. What's different in CBRS compared to your Part 90 network today? And some of our customers that we worked with, they call it the CBRS journey. So it is a journey where you transition your network from the current Part 90 to Part 96. The end goal is obviously to get access to more spectrum compared to what you have right now. But on that journey, on the way, you also have to start to get familiar with the fact that now this is a shared spectrum, and you have also the SAS that you were working with. And as Google here, we want to present some of the options and some of the learnings that we have had during this transition with a number of customers. And whether you're just starting to get started with migration to CBRS, this session is aimed at sharing some of these first-hand learnings and experiences from past migrations that's already occurred, as well as answering some of these questions that we have been receiving through the Google SAS support and other means. Obviously, we can't cover everything in this short webinar, but we're hoping that the audience takeaway from this session is some very practical information that you can use as you start to venture in this journey. So the first thing to plan and the migration step, if you will, bear in mind that the deadline for this transition is October 17th for 80% of grandfathered licenses. I'm actually happy to report that we just yesterday finished a migration of a decent size WISP that's using Telrad, and that was very successful. They followed this particular 4-step migration process, and we're very happy to report that was without any major obstacles. So the first part of this migration is the planning phase. The planning phase is super important. This is where you collect the information about your network as a whole. That basically all your installation data that's needed to provision the CBSD information. The next phase is a setup and prepare. So you might have found some issues during your setup and preparation phase that needs to be taken care of. And we'll go into these in more detail in the later slides. The next common process is to test and communicate. You want to, when you do the testing of the transition, you want to test that in a controlled area. If you have a toy cell, or if you have a little cluster of sites and CBSDs that you can do this on, that's the best approach before you start the next phase, which is the execute and verify. So these are the 4 major phases as part of the actual transition. The 5th step is what we call the optimize and expand, and we're going to elaborate a little bit on some of the new channel reports that we can generate from the SAS side, and that we want to share with the audience on your specific network. that you can use for this particular process of how to optimize with this incremental spectrum and expand either capacity expansion or coverage expansion. So that's the four main migration step, as well as the fifth, the expand and optimize phase. I want to stress one thing. That's what we have learned over the past migrations. It is a daunting task for many of these networks, and it's always the first phase that requires the largest effort, but it's also probably the most important part of the transition, making sure that you understand all the nitty-gritty details of your network. And also a lot of customers that we worked with in the past, even though it's a hard task to inventorize all your network and get all the data done, it's also when you end up with, after the migration, you end up with a better understanding of your network, and sometimes it is a little bit of a cleanup, but you always end up with a better network at the end. Just make sure that you allocate enough time for the planning phase, because that is the one that typically takes the longest time and also the greatest effort. The planning phase, so you can look at that as kind of 5 steps, and most of you probably completed some of these already. Obviously, you need to be signed up with a SAS or through Telrad. The next phase is the gather network and equipment information, and this is where we're going to show you some of the basic tools that we created. Also, a very good common practice, and I will demonstrate that later on, is to map out your network. Once you gather it, use the tool that Google offers in Network Planner to map out the network that you have and discover any potential irregularities that needs to be corrected. Of course, ensure that you have CPI certified engineers on staff. And then also another part is to check your Part 90 license status. If you have existing grandfathered license in your coverage area, they might be blocking the upper 50 part of the network today. So those are the steps of the planning. Here's some URLs that we included in this deck just for your reference. How to check your Part 90 license is in the link there in the middle, and also how to cancel the Part 90 license. We get quite a few questions on how do we realize that we are blocked on the upper part of the spectrum when we have to migrate to Part 96 CBRS. How do we cancel those licenses? So we get that question quite often, and here's the link to how you can relinquish those frequencies, either individually one by one, or you can relinquish the entire all your sites that you have. The timing of this, typically it's about 2 weeks time plus minus. We had an average about 2 weeks time from when you request the relinquishment of the Part 90Z license until it's fully updated in all the SASs, and you can start to use the upper part of the spectrum. I mentioned this part of this planning phase is a very good idea to map out your network. Ensure all your data is correct prior to importing. If there's something that's pointing in the wrong direction, or you might have some decimal points that might be incorrectly placed, it gives a very good mapping baseline of the network. And during some of these migrations we've done, we've seen that operators that uses this, it catches errors up front before you start putting the data into the SAS tool. So I'll show you a little demo of some of the common practices that have been used specifically for this, and how you can detect those. So we have we created this inventory sheet. It's a basic Google spreadsheet, but it contains all the information and all the pertinent information too that's required from the SAS. And obviously you can put additional information as you see fit. We see that some operators like to put their PCI codes in here. They like to put antenna structure information here, but you can add all of the information that's important for your particular network in this particular sheet. This sheet feeds 2 more sheets. One is the network planner input, and I'll show you how that is used. But this network planner input is basically the input where you use this, so you can drag and drop into our network planner tool to verify that your data is consistent and it's good. The other sheet is the SAS input sheet, similar to how we can import directly from this sheet into network planner. we have that option to do that into the SAS. So I'm going to show you how it's typically done. I'm going to drag this over here and pull that to the side. And while I do that, I click File. I do a download as a comma-separated file. And the other side here, I have Network Planner. And I can drag that over to the other side with my small screen. Let's see, oops. Let me pull this down. Here was the comma-separated file that I just downloaded. I want to see how my network looks like. This is a demonstration network. I want to see how it looks like, just to make sure I caught all discrepancies and et cetera, And we have on this one, we made a couple of deliberate mistakes that we've seen typically in these networks. You see, one of the common mistakes is the lat and long is incorrect, and here clearly there's an issue with this CPE that is located somewhere in Asia, and it shouldn't be. So you simply click on this, and you can see there's a minus missing. So you can update that here, and you update that in the spreadsheet. So you caught that error. That would have been an error that you might been needing to troubleshoot for an hour or two as you go through the actual migration during the maintenance window. The other common thing that is worth looking at is this demonstration network here is somewhere in the panhandle of Florida. And if you go into and start looking at your network, you see a couple of things that you should have caught or that might be incorrect in your data fill. This CPE obviously here, it's not pointing in the right direction, so you can click it and you can see the azimuth was 180 degrees off, so you can update that here and in your spreadsheet. So you catch these errors. You want to catch these errors before you actually do the upload to the SAS, and use this network tool for this purpose. Some operators obviously also run the propagation, so you can see some other things. They import their polygons for what they have to cover. Some even imports customer locations as well that they want to cover in the future. So Network Planner can be used for this purpose, but obviously many other things as well. So this was just a quick demonstration of how to use the Network Planner as a tool to validate your data. Just gonna find my slides again. So the other part is another question that we typically get many times is the planning of the spectrum. Obviously, you go from 50 megahertz to 150 or somewhere. Sometimes you obviously have to deal with other operators in that same area. So how do you plan your spectrum? And this is where a new functionality is coming into place called the Coexistence that we have deployed within the Google environment. Basically check your spectrum. We have a feature in the SAS where you can check the spectrum availability upfront, not just from a power level perspective, but also from a signal quality perspective. Bear in mind that we have very high detail clutter data in our planning tool that we use on a frequent basis to check what the spectrum looks like in your area, not just from power perspective, but also from interference perspective. By clicking the map, you can see the coex data that we have here. You can see by clicking the Google SAS map, you will see spectrum availability, and you will also see the channel quality. So that when you're wanting to move channels around in your network, you can upfront see which channels are clean from a performance perspective and from a prediction perspective. And we also rank all these different channels. So this is a way that you can use the Google tool to plan your spectrum either ahead or after you've done the migration. Then the other thing is that we can do is there's two more parameters as part of this. This is called in the COEX group. These are the CCG parameters and ICG parameters. The CCG parameters, and this all can also be imported into the SAS tool that will help you generate the report that I'm going to show you later on in this deck. But the CCG parameters is a parameter that you can add that defines the linkage between the base station sector and the CPE. Obviously, you need to make sure that these are using the same frequencies, but it also helps the SAS tool when we run the frequency channel optimization report that we can generate for you. it helps the SAS understand, well, this CPE should belong to and be connected to this particular base station sector. There's also the ICG groups. That's a group of channels that certainly do not interfere with each other. And those are the parameters that we can insert for every single CBSDs that basically helps the Google SAS to identify, when you run a channel report, here are the best channels for not just one single sector, but for the entire network as a whole. So what the Google SAS can do is to create a frequency planning report that basically looks at, here's your current channel and here's your current assignments of your channels across the entire network of yours. Look at what are the other incumbents and what are the other operators doing in the network. Where are the free channels for you to use, and which ones of those channels is the best ones and optimal to use for each of your CBSDs. So it's a channel report that we can generate from the SAS that is utilizing all of this information, including the propagation engines that we have. I have a slide later on that shows a little more detail, and obviously we can have a separate session later on just to go into more detail as well. The next phase of the 4 phases is the setup and preparation phase. Obviously, before you start doing migration, make sure you're familiar with the SAS portal. Familiarize yourself with it. Make sure you understand the details, where to find them, etc., etc. The other thing that you identified as part of the planning phase was there might be some updates that you need in the network. There might be some CPs that needs firmware. The base station might needs an update. Also check your connectivity, that it's properly in place. In some cases, the CBSDs, or in the case a domain proxy, needs to be able to do a DNS resolve. So there are some network issues that needs to be validated before you start doing any migration. In terms of migration strategy, we have seen 4 different approaches being utilized, and it all depends on how your network is constructed, what you're comfortable with, and other factors that may impact your decision. But there's 4 main ways this can be done. One is obviously do a side-by-side and associated CPs that's associated with that site. So one site at a time could be an approach. The other one we've seen is a cluster by cluster approach. You pick a cluster of sites that you're comfortable with and have perhaps technicians in the field in case something goes wrong. So there's a typical cluster by cluster approach. Sometimes there's multiple vendors involved, and you will do a vendor by vendor. And then the 4th option that we've seen a couple of times is a flash cut. So do the entire network and get it over with in one go. The other thing that's very important as part of any work before you do any migration is to look at what are the KPIs that you're interested in collecting before. How do you collect those KPIs to make sure that the network is performing the same or even better after the transition? So collect your data, find out what your performance indicators are, find out the method of which how to collect those information. If you have access to historical trend, and if you can get it on per CPE level, you can very quickly see what might have happened during this migration. And also run a parameter audit before the migration, so that after the migration, if something is not completely the way it should be, you can always go back and compare the parameters from before the migration. So these are some important steps that we found was good to perform as part of this migration. In this case, there's an option to import the parameters into the SAS prior to any migration, and in some cases you can also pre-register them to make sure that all the parameters are consistent across your network. And you can check the spectrum and the power available using that using the import and using the options in the SAS portal, just like I showed in one of the previous slides. And with that, the spreadsheet that I showed earlier, the other tab, it is as easy as I showed in the network planner. You can download a comma separated file that you can drag and drop into the SAS portal. It works exactly the same way. And if you do the import into the network planner ahead of time and make sure that there's no errors, this should be pretty smooth. The next phase is the test and communicate. This is where you want to test out the migration on a little portion of your network. So select your area that you want to migrate. If you have a toy cell, that could also be an option. Create a detailed mob, not just for how you're going to do the execution of the migration, but also if something happens and you need to revert back. So this is of course always important. And then communicate to all your constituents and potentially your customers, definitely your customer care, the rest of the engineering team, that this migration is going to happen. Make sure that you use this as a testing option, so that when you do the next phase of executing on the entire network, you know exactly who you need to communicate this to and how. And of course then execute. And the last phase, evaluate. Evaluate not just the performance, but also evaluate the mob. So if any changes that needs to happen, you can update that before you actually do the mass migration. And the last one, assuming that all these steps has been done well before, it's a simple execution and execute and verify. Follow those 4 steps. You're setting up the baseline. Again, you perhaps do another parameter audit, do a performance audit per CPE and for a network wide, execute it. Typically, we are seeing these migration done during the maintenance window, but we also seen some done during the daytime. Once that is done, evaluate not just your entire network, but evaluate, if you can, customer by customer, to make sure that everything works better than before. And then, of course, verify all the parameters and the spectrum is set up correctly. And that's the last part of the execution. Then this phase 5 is where we're starting to get more and more questions on how can we as a Telrad and Google help with optimize the CBRS spectrum that's now available. And this is where we use the Google geodata that we have available. We have very high resolution of clutter, including building and trees. We can use that to create propagation maps using our propagation engine that's running in the Google Cloud. We of course has CBSD details, not just of your CBSDs, but the other CBSDs that might be in your serving area. So we can see who is using which channels and which channels are best for you to use for each individual CBSD. And of course, the network configuration. If you have provided the CCG and the ICG information per CBSD, then we can use that information to further optimize these planning reports. And then the last slide I have is a sample channel report that we produce. It's a site-by-site or CBSD, CBE or CBSD per CBSD, showing what's the name, what's the site, here's the channels that you use, here's the recommended channel based on the algorithm that we composed that you can assign to your network, not just in the upper 50 where your site were before, but the entire breadth of the 150 megahertz of spectrum. So that's a report that we can help you generate to with that last step, which is expand and optimize. And with that, Alex, I'll hand it back over to you.
Awesome, thank you, Martin. There are no questions in the chat window that I can see, not yet at least, but I'm sure those will be coming through. That was very interesting, and in fact, you are correct. With the proper preparation, it's quite structured process. You know, nothing is perfect, but so far with every customer, you know, with the proper steps of taking their existing network, you know, creating CBSDs, porting them, and I do have to re-emphasize the importance of Coexist. It's nothing less than magical. I still can't figure out how you guys came up with this system, and it's working. So let me share my screen to go over a couple of action items. All right, I think everybody should be able to see it. So, so CBRS has not been an easy journey for us. We've been working on that for the last couple of years, obviously. Some of the people that are on the call with us today in the general group, I've been there from the beginning. Went through fire and the water. So it definitely was not easy, but what we do know for sure is that the process is functional, it's working. We have a software and we are constantly working to improve that and add additional features, improve performance, and so on. So what I would like to do is, just for people that are not familiar with Telrad, a quick overview who we are and what we are. So we are a 67, 68-year-old company. We are one of the first technology firms established in the state of Israel since its inception. We have deployments in pretty much almost every part of the globe. Back in a few years ago, to say the least, we have acquired assets of and some of the technology from a company called Alvarian. They were the pioneers in fixed wireless broadband space. So every piece of hardware today or software that we offer contains some of that DNA, intellectual property, or technology that is built specifically around fixed wireless access. And that's why we do say that we're purpose-built, because everything about our LTE system is purpose-built to serve fixed wireless users better. So important aspect, and cannot stress it enough, we offer end-to-end LTE solution. That means we offer the EPC, we offer the eNode Bs, the base stations. We offer subscriber units, the software that runs it all together. And now we obviously added the domain proxy capability, and that's the piece of software that is communicating with SAS and Google in particular in this particular that makes things run. And it having a single vendor ownership within LTE portfolio is important, and I cannot stress it enough how important in terms of making things work smoothly. Certain capabilities that might not be that may be unique to us, but may be required for a service provider to offer, like layer 2, for example, or starvation protection algorithms. If there is a deficiency, some nuances and bugs in the chipset for CPE, we don't have to point fingers. We can just take it and fix things internally and offset those problems and deficiencies within our software and so on. So over time, it proved time and time again, having a single vendor ownership of a complete solution makes sense. It makes deployments easier, faster, and at the end of the day, it results in better services to customers. So what's important to remember about Telrad is we technically, within the CBRS domain, we sell one SKU, one base station. And that single base station can be deployed 6 different ways. So so that's why it does take a minute to really understand what exactly means. A single customer, same network, can utilize base station from low density markets geographies to high density, to offer services 100 by 20 or anything like that. So and this is the beautiful part of Telrad. It's always one SKU that can be run deployed 6 different ways. So for CBRS, we do have our Compact 1000 base station, who's OnGo certified. All of our CP portfolio that we offer today or being deployed is also CBRS Part 96 certified. The only CP that we were not able to transition into CBRS was CP 7000, and we do have a replacement program ongoing today that basically means forklifting devices. So again, by now, I hope everybody is aware of that and taking advantage of this program. We recently introduced 5 gigahertz system. It is an LTE. It is also LTE, and our 5 gigahertz system works in conjunction with CBRS as well. Has ability to work, so-called dual band connectivity, interband carrier aggregation. In situations in the markets and geographies where CBRS just not enough or might not have enough spectrum, or you want to build additional redundancies in case if you're operating in GAA, in general access, and you are located within the DPA, dynamic protection areas, and you want to be 100% confident regardless what happens. If you are on the move list or if your grant gets suspended, you want to maintain that connectivity and serviceability. You can combine CBRS together with 5 gigahertz and offer that dual band connectivity in case if one fails for whatever reasons. You still have, you provide half the capacity, but you still have a capacity and connectivity to your customers. And that's becoming quite interesting. It's, you know, it's a different concept, but we were able to implement it, and probably in the next few weeks we're going to have some pilots done here in the US, and going to be a little bit more noise about it. Portfolio of CPEs, I'll skip that, and I just talked a little bit about the dual band connectivity, the base station chaining. So to go back to the theme is migration, and we have prepared a magnitudes of different documents and guides and assistance, and we've done quite a few webinars live and offline to assist customers in preparation. As far as this is your checklist, make sure you do this, because under Part 90, you know, everything is great except some of the information wasn't there, like geolocations, azimuths, and so on. That needs to be collected and added. Yes, there are tools to simplify and improve and make things run a little bit faster and take, you know, less time, but still someone has to get this information. That information has to be incorporated into the CBSD profile. And then you have a couple ways. You can either use the Google's interface or use Telrad's interface when you are creating those CBSDs for this information to be provided for, you know, CBSD profile to be created. So for people that are stepping and brand new into CBRS, obviously that's probably not an issue. But for existing networks, when we're talking about 1,000, 2,000 subscriber units, it's it's a challenge. But not an impossible. We, again, like Martin mentioned earlier, with the organization and structure, everything is very, very doable. So there are, I'm not going to be going through those steps. It's a whole separate presentation. We have quite a few documents, but essentially for existing customers, it's like I mentioned, besides the manual work of gathering information of CPE geolocations, everything else is done within the software, and it's quite quite reasonable and efficient. Where we upgrade the Breeze View to make sure that it contains the domain proxy function. You obviously enable it. You attach to Google, and you know, you create CBSD devices. You sign it by a CPI. You obviously have to have a certified professional installer. Google provides a certification program as well through Coursera, I believe. And that's it. And then you just go step by step and add either devices one by one, or we do offer you a mass import where you can do more than one, obviously, and that obviously can make things run a little bit faster as far as migrating existing networks into CBRS. And then through the GUI, you can select one or more devices, register, and get it working online, and that's it. And at that point, Google will see the device, it's granted, it's kosher, legal, and yeah, life goes on. So the process, yeah, it's not perfect, but it's well massaged and structured where existing networks can move comfortably and confidently into CBRS. That's really about it in terms of what's needed from Telrad. And we are available here for to answer any questions. Google has phenomenal support through and online resources that can answer majority of the questions. Weekly, Tuesday, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, there are live webinars that talk about the Network Planner, which is very, very interesting and cool tool. It's definitely worthwhile looking and understanding the purpose of it, but it does give you an ability to model the LTE coverage and see if subscribers can be covered or not, what kind of services can be offered or not without or before rolling the truck to that site. So again, definitely worthwhile going through that and sitting through one of the webinars and learning more about the network planner. Any questions from the group? You guys been reasonably quiet, and I want to make sure that you're we're being efficient and respectful with your time. All right. Well, Martin, did you want to add anything else?
Yeah, I just want to add to thanks for bringing up the onboarding session that on Tuesdays we call them. Also, if you're interested, all of these previous onboarding sessions are recorded on YouTube and available in case you want to see some previous versions of it. We go through the entire process of using these different tools, not just Network Planner, but also the SAS. And you can look at some of these previously recorded sessions as well. And as you said, Alex, there's a lot of information in there, and that you can use. If you have questions, you can also use the Google SAS support that we offer as well.
Awesome, thank you, Martin. There are some questions that are coming in. Hello, Barry. Who do we contact at Google to gain access to the planner? So Barry, what we will do, and same thing applies to the rest of the group, is send us email. You can send it to sales at Telrad or marketing at Telrad, and we will provide links and make the connections within Google's team to get you into the program. And these guys will be able to accommodate. Or in various cases, you know my email address. So is there a way, Martin, this is actually a good question for you. Is there a way to export all CBSDs from SAS portal, not the network planner?
Is there a way to export them? Not at the moment, but it is a roadmap item that we have coming up very, very shortly. It's a good question, yes. But at the moment, we don't have an export function, but it is a question that's been asked frequently. So it's something that's coming up on the roadmap.
Okay. So James, so from Google's side through web interface, not yet. From Breeze View side, yes, you can. So, but eventually that feature will be available. But in case if you are using a Breeze View to manage your CBSDs, you can easily export the CBSD profiles. Oh, Joyce just mentioned for access, SAS SAS-support at google.com. So you may send your inquiries directly to Google's SAS support group, SAS-support at google.com. Now, one more question. As an integrator, I work with many. Okay, got it. Okay, thanks, Barry. All right, anything else? So while there are a couple more questions being typed. I wanted to emphasize concept about coexistence, and we've been stumbling into this more and more within the CBRS frequency band. We've been dealing with that for EBS, BRS, the 2.5 gigahertz frequency bands for forever, essentially. If you're coexisting with other service providers like Sprint, for example, in 2.5, you want to make sure that you're coexisting with the same technology. So that helps you to avoid the interference, and interference is mutual. So so within the CBRS, if you're going to build a network or expand your network, I can't stress enough, expand it with the same technology that the rest is running, and the rest is going to run LTE. Very likely, you really going to have no choice. You're going to have to coexist, most likely, with one of the carriers, one or more carriers. So, and there's only so much spectrum. Yes, SAS will do its best in managing it, but physics are physics. So we do strongly encourage people to look into the technology that they're using. Carriers building networks in very different manner. They are building in macro cells, and then with very powerful base stations, and then they drop the small cells to build extra capacity. So the noise and interference is somewhat different than in traditional unlicensed frequency bands, as well as under Part 90, since you just haven't been dealing with that much. Please be prepared to deal with coexistence. And if you're going to coexist with the same common technology. That will allow you to set your configuration, your so-called splits between uplink and downlink, and the only common configuration that also gives you ability to future-proof your network with 5G, because LTE does have that path. Frame allocation 2, special subframe 7. This is the common one that gives you interoperability between, or coexistence between 4G and 5G, the LTE and 5G NR. So just be cognizant of that. The more carriers going to build their small cells in the geography, the more problem going to become, or the bigger problem going to become for you, running non-LTE technology in that geography. One more question from Marlene. Should we be able to see other providers on Google SAS map? Marlene, are you referring to I'm guessing you're talking about service providers. So Martin, question. So you have a service provider, right? Service provider X in geography Y, and he is coexisting with another service provider. Somewhere there is an overlap. How much information does that service provider X have about that maybe competitor, maybe friendly operator? Do they know the geography where they cover or not? Does Google provide any kind of that kind of service?
We can't in the SAS you cannot see any other service providers, and the only thing that we can see, you can't see the other service provider in the SAS. You can see the effect of it if you use some of the tools inside the SAS to see what's the available spectrum. You will be able to see the available spectrum that this particular CBSD has available, and its channel quality for all of the 10 channels. So that's what you're able to see, but you can extract an information about anybody else's network from the SAS.
Thank you. So Marlene, so the idea is that Google will give you guidance on best possible channel to be used for that particular geography without disclosing information about second operator in the same geography or near. Question from Peter. On Google's site, quite a bit of documentation, definition guides. Some of it may be a little bit outdated. With regards to the interface as it currently exists, if you guys are planning to update some of that, some of those resources.
So we have a roadmap. Maybe perhaps we can share at some point in time with some additions that are coming to the SAS and also Network Planner. We also share some of these roadmaps and information during some of these onboarding sessions. And also we're always interested in feedback and proposals and good ideas. So if there's any specific ideas that the audience might have of improvements or any other things that we should include as part of the interface, we're very, very interested in knowing about those. So yes, there's some new things coming to Network Planner and to the Google SAS in the very short-term future that we can share at some point in time.
Awesome, thank you. Well, I think this is about it. We're 10 minutes ahead of schedule. Those are gonna go back to everybody. I would like to thank Google's team and Martin in particular for spending your hour with us and educating and sharing some of that information. I'm a strong believer in knowledge is the power. So the more people know, the less mistakes they make, the less expensive it's gonna be. So as I like to say, experience is a good teacher, but very expensive. So let's save some dollars here and there. Again, thanks everybody. Any additional questions, feel free to send us offline if you know our direct contact informations. If not, send emails to sales@telrad.com. We will pick up and answer in timely manner, or marketing@telrad.com. And just a quick reminder for Google SAS support, it's SAS, SAS at support-support@google.com. And again, thanks Google team, and we look forward to working with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much.